Well, I suppose we'll start by introducing ourselves and this talk. Good morning. My name's Robert King. I'm a writer and an editor and a perpetual student. I like to focus on story structure and narrative voice in my writing, but I also love learning about my Catholic faith and sharing that faith with others. And I have a strange hobby of trying to hold rational conversations on the internet.
That is maybe the strangest thing you do.
It is a very strange thing.
Sorry, I kind of interrupted you. I interrupted you there. Were you done?
Yes, I was.
Okay,
I
cool.
was done.
Cool. I'm Megan. I'm also Catholic. I'm also a lay Dominican, as mentioned right before morning prayer started. I work as an administrative assistant at a local Anglican church, which is fun. I'm also trying my hand at writing. Robert and I are working on some joint projects. And for fun, aside from reading nerdy books, I am studying Latin in hopes that I will be able to read Virgil's Aeneid in the original someday. I also do lots with yarn. So
cool.
Try to make things like hats, but also keep the yarn from going, into my cat's hiding places. So anyway,
cats are horrible that way, lovely in other ways.
Yes.
As you can probably tell, we are both avid readers. We're book nerds from our youth, and one of the things we love about books is the not just diving into the world of the story and kind of getting lost in there ourselves, but when we come out, sharing that with our friends and having conversations and talking about it and discovering how other people read the same books we're reading.
Yeah. Reading is kind of one of those like glorious, magical, like it works on all the levels. Like it's good for me as an extrovert, because it gives me time to be alone with my thoughts, but also I have things to bring to people when I want to go be with them. And hopefully they'll geek out with me. And it's good for introverts like Robert because it gives you a reason to.
It gives me a reason to leave my cave.
It gives you a reason to leave your cave. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know if this is the time to announce it, but Robert and I are also working on a podcast. The first episode, I think we're releasing next week, hopefully on Monday.
We're planning to drop it on Monday, yeah.
Planning to drop it on Monday. We are calling it Epic Book Club, and we essentially do what we like doing for fun, and that is we read epic books and we talk about them. And yeah, it's kind of our attempt to maybe bring more people into the friendship and the conversation about great works of literature, whether that be like the Iliad or N.K. Jemisin's Broken Earth trilogy. Like, just we are using epic in the broadest sense, meaning awesome things that we like.
Yeah. I think that's the most technical definition of epic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We're technically correct.
Yes, that is the best kind of correct.
Exactly.
Anyway, we're going to talk specifically today about the theme of duty and morality in epics, because that's the theme of this conference, and that's what we're here to do. I just want to let Megan know, I was thinking about how we're a little short on time, so I've started a timer for us, and I'll try to keep us
perfect
a little bit moving.
Cool. Because we never get distracted. Yeah.
No, we never do. So when we're talking about duty and morality, you can look at this in a lot of different ways, but for the purposes of today's conversation, at least for this talk, we'll see how other talks do it. We're looking at duty and morality as two distinct approaches to how we should behave, to questions of ethics. And so we're going to divide those up. Duty meaning basically a rules-based way of looking at the world, sort of a right versus wrong, on versus off. It's kind of a binary way of fulfilling the law or breaking the law. You do your duty or you fail in your duty. I think
And
that's,
then morality,
yeah,
which we're saying is based more in the idea of good and evil, of being able to grow in virtue, to become a better person, and discovering the possibilities of what you can do in any situation. And in this case, it's a bit more numinous. It's not an exactly an off-on switch. Like there's kind of a range,
yeah, it's like,
like a range of appropriate actions or inappropriate actions, I guess, if you're choosing evil.
yeah. Although why anyone would do that is beyond me.
Yeah.
Maybe a familiar way of thinking about these two different approaches is the D&D alignment chart, which many of us are probably familiar with. You've got lawful and chaotic on one side and good and evil on the other side. And you kind of describe your character's moral or ethical attitudes as somewhere within this range of tensions. So lawful good or lawful evil or chaotic good or chaotic evil or somewhere neutral in the middle. And one of the things that D&D players and geeks generally have discovered is that there is an inherent tension between these, to the extent that lawful good is often called lawful stupid, because they tend to put the lawful ahead of the good. So if there's a conflict or tension between what's lawful and what's good, they tend to side on the side of lawful. Anyway, it's this is maybe a quick hand way of thinking about the distinction we're making between duty and morality. We often see these conflicts in real life. Maybe at a small scale, we might be thinking of traffic laws, which are, absolute laws that are on the books and we have to obey them unless there's an emergency situation. Maybe you're taking someone who's injured to the hospital, and traffic laws take a back seat to the emergency situation in those cases.
And then something maybe like tipping, which is you kind of get into kind of some complexities there, because tipping isn't legally required, but people really frown on it if you don't tip. Like it's considered polite and good.
And it's even assumed. It's like
tip well. Like it's assumed that you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could get to as big a topic as the idea of self-defense or theories of just war, where what is lawful and what is good or moral to do can come into conflict really easily. Now, to be clear, we're not going to resolve any of these conflicts today. That's not what we're talking about. But these are examples of how these show up in real life, and they cause a lot of both intellectual and emotional anxiety trying to deal with this tension.
To figure out how to resolve it. And so one thing that people have done throughout recorded history is we tell stories that help us wrestle with the tension, to hopefully work it out without actually being stuck in the moral quandary, or to kind of give us a separate place to question without it being personal.
Yeah, without having to face the consequences myself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say maybe personal is the wrong word, because I definitely cry during a lot of books. So
yeah, I mean, a good story does get personal, and I think it's because we identify with the quandary that the characters are in, right?
Exactly.
Like a quick example, what I like to call the Batman dilemma. Joker seems to go through this revolving door of Arkham Asylum. Batman captures Joker and he goes back to Arkham Asylum and comes out and kills more people. Batman catches him and goes back. A lot of times the question is raised, should Batman just kill Joker? And there are some storylines of Batman where he has. And it's this tension. Should he obey the law, which is to bring Joker to legitimate legal justice, where he's likely to get out and kill again, or should he save all of those potential lives and kill the Joker outright? What is good? What is right? It's not necessarily a clear question, and we use stories to explore the possibilities and figure out what we might do ourselves.
Yeah, safe to say a significant portion, maybe even most, narrative conflict arises from this tension. Go ahead, sorry.
Okay. It's like, how do we get through this outline quickly and
quickly and smoothly
and still get
to our main point. So we're here at a Christian sci-fi fantasy conference,
welcome
and
to
so
Doxacon.
Obviously welcome to Doxacon Seattle, everybody. We're going to posit that Christ does offer us an answer to this tension.
Or maybe not a solution, but a way to move beyond this tension, a way to sort of transcend the question, the apparent conflict between these. We want to say that not only does Christ reconcile humanity to God, but also reconciles duty to morality. So we are going to, the plan of the talk is we want to give a few examples from stories, and we're going to have to make those examples quick, I think. But we hope these examples will highlight the difference that we're talking about. And then after the presentation, if there's time, God willing, we will open it to questions and answers and have a little discussion about that.
Yeah, and we're more than happy to chat with people on Discord today or at later times, because we love talking about these things.
Yeah.
So let's start at the beginning. Good place to start.
A very good place to start.
A very good place. Doe. Anyway, so the earliest extant epic poem that we have is the Epic of Gilgamesh. The current version, the current version that in its completeness is from about the 18th century BC. And it tells the story of a king of the Mesopotamian city Uruk. And he has lots of adventures, but the story begins, and he is an absolute tyrant who oppresses the citizens. He forces labor, he forces them into competitions, and he forces himself on the newly married women. And the thing is at this point in time, all of those things were legal, but they weren't good, because the people cry out to their gods and they say, the king is oppressing us, this is horrible. And the gods say, you're right, this is horrible. And they send Enkidu.
Enkidu is, so what you need to know is Gilgamesh is a Lugal, which means a big man. He is in fact a giant. He's described as like 16 feet tall or something like that. He's
it was like, I forget what the cubits were, but we did the conversion. It was like, he's 16 foot tall guy. Yeah.
And
we call him
Enkidu is the only guy who can match him. He's almost as tall, he's almost as strong, he's able to give Gilgamesh a really good fight. And Enkidu, so the gods send Enkidu to sort of humble Gilgamesh and to put him in his place and to help him rule more justly. So right from the beginning of like civilized literature, we have this example of a tension between someone who is following the law, doing what is legally correct, but the gods set him straight that legally correct is not enough. There's something else that has to be taken into account here, because the gods are a reliable source of morality, aren't they? In these ancient cultures and religions, the gods they're always good and kind and consistent. And what
reliably unreliable, yes.
Why, tell me more, Megan.
But wait, there's more. So we're also going to look at the Iliad very briefly here. And there's a lot of tension about what's right, what's good, what's lawful and what's not lawful between gods and men, between men and other men, between gods and other gods. The gods are kind of lifted up as a standard. Like, you don't want to make them angry, but you don't always know what will necessarily make them angry. And making one god happy might make another god very angry with you. So the Iliad is Homer's epic poem about the fight between Achilles and Agamemnon during the last days of the Trojan War. The written version dates to around the 8th century BC. And as I said, in the Iliad, both mortals and gods struggle with this tension between duty and morality. Yeah, I'll let you. There's a few examples that we need to get through in this, but so I'll let you take the first one, Robert, and I'll take.
So yeah, the Iliad gets started with it's a situation that is perfectly legal in that day and age. The king who is the general over all of the Greek armies, Agamemnon, they go on a raiding party and they capture people. And one of the people they capture is a woman that Agamemnon takes as his own personal slave. And her father comes to Agamemnon and offers a ransom to purchase his daughter back from him. And all of this is pretty standard fare in the ancient world of warfare. When you raid a place, you take slaves. It's common for people to ransom those slaves back from the war parties that captured them. It's generally accepted that if someone offers you a reasonable ransom, you accept it. That's it's kind of like tipping. It's not legally required, but it's kind of generally accepted that you got to do it. It's the way things work. And so Chryseis, the woman that Agamemnon captured, her father Chryses comes and offers a generous ransom for her, but Agamemnon refuses. And this sets off a huge fight among the Greek generals, and particularly between Achilles and Agamemnon, because Chryses is a priest of Apollo. And so he asks Apollo, is this right? And Apollo agrees, no, it's not right. And he sends a plague on all the Greeks. So Agamemnon does wrong. All the Greeks suffer for it. Achilles kind of steps up for the Greeks, and Agamemnon and Achilles just kind of go at it.
Yeah.
And
so the reason that Achilles is angry is the Greeks convince Agamemnon to send Chryseis, his captured woman, back to her family. And Agamemnon says, fine, I'll do it to end the plague, but I'm taking somebody else's prize. And so he takes a woman that Achilles captured, Briseis, and Achilles is like, no, you know what, if you're going to steal my things, sorry, women were considered things back then, not good. So he refuses to fight, and the other Greek generals come to him and say, well, you got to fight because Agamemnon is king over you. He's the bigger man. Like, yes, you're the best fighter, but you it's lawful to listen to Agamemnon. And Achilles is like, no, because Agamemnon doesn't do what's good. Achilles maybe doesn't do what's good either, but it's a whole epic.
So this is what we would expect. The humans are fighting amongst themselves over what's right and wrong, what's good and evil. But when they turn to the gods, we see infighting there too. So, for example, Achilles asks his mother, who is the sea nymph Thetis, to ask a favor of Zeus, basically to take sides in the war. And Zeus is fine with this to a certain extent, but is kind of afraid of his wife Hera, who likes the Greek side. And what Achilles is asking is for Zeus to side with the Trojans and wipe out the Greek armies for the sole purpose of humiliating Agamemnon.
Yeah.
Nobody comes out well in this story.
Nobody really does. Yeah, so you see some of the tension in the relationship between the gods, because Zeus says, yeah, sure, I'll do what you're asking of me. And he thinks to himself, how am I going to do this without alerting to Hera? And so what he ends up doing is he sends dreams to Agamemnon telling him, if you go fight the Trojans tomorrow, you will win. It will be glorious. And so he convinces the entire Greek army that if they go now, they'll win. It will be glorious because the gods told him. But the thing was, Zeus was lying.
The gods lied to.
The gods lied to him. But the thing is sometimes the gods don't lie to you. And there's really no way to tell.
So you can't count on the gods to tell you what's right or wrong, good or evil anymore.
And everybody's favorite philosopher, Plato, well, maybe not everybody's favorite, but Plato brings this up in his...
Megan's favorite philosopher.
One of my favorite philosophers. Brings it up in the Euthyphro, which is a short dialogue about Socrates and a man named Euthyphro. And they're talking about right action. Like, how do you know what's the right way to act? What is piety, essentially? That's the word that it often gets translated as. And Euthyphro says, well, piety is doing what the gods tell you to do. That's how you know what's right and wrong. It's doing the will of the gods. And Socrates says, we all know these stories about the gods.
We've all read Homer.
We've all read Homer. We've all heard Homer being chanted by bards. Sometimes one god says one thing, does another, changes his mind. And sometimes you make one god happy, but it makes another god really unhappy. So which one of these is right? Like, we still need a higher standard to be aiming at, and just saying, follow the will of the gods doesn't actually answer it. And Euthyphro, and Plato doesn't actually solve this issue in the Euthyphro. Euthyphro begs off, like, I got other things to do, Socrates, sorry. And Socrates is like, but wait, we haven't solved our problem. And then the dialogue ends.
But he at least raises the question in a really articulate and clear way. And it's interesting that he raises it based on the stories that they've been told. We were going to talk about the Aeneid. I'm not sure we have time. Do you mind if we skip the Aeneid and get to some more contemporary examples?
Yeah, let's go to contemporary. Sorry, guys, we love the Iliad, but the Aeneid is awesome too. We don't have time. All right, going forward. Talk to us later. We'll talk your ear off. Yay.
Yes. Today, epic literature, you can largely find it, epic stories, you find them largely in science fiction and fantasy, which is why we think it's appropriate to talk about epics at a sci-fi fantasy con. A little later today, we're going to hear from Tim Brown on Star Trek, which is, a huge kind of epic story of our day. So we're not going to talk too much about Star Trek right now, but it does raise a lot of these questions of tension between duty and morality in this way. Star Wars, the other kind of big hitter in the sci-fi field, does the same. It has this very clear distinction between the light side and the dark side. And it's super clear and binary, and it makes a lot of sense until you start looking at it more closely, and you see how kind of inconsistent it is across the different stories that they tell within that franchise. That could be a whole talk on its own.
Yeah.
But so we want to acknowledge kind of the big hitters, but we also want to talk about a couple other modern examples that we think are like really immediate and relevant today.
There's an extraordinarily recent example
Mhm.
that has come up. It has been very popular. Encanto. Uh, we won't sing the songs right now, but if you haven't
No,
watched
no,
it,
no.
no. But especially like Louisa and Isabella is kind of where we had a lot of our conversation, but really any
Mhm.
member of the Madrigal family, um, they misunderstood their gifts because they felt bound by their duty versus their sense of self and goodness. Louisa, feeling like if she doesn't do what everybody asks of her, maybe she's worthless.
Mm.
And Isabella feeling like she's bound in irons by this need to appear perfect. She has
Mhm.
this amazing ability to create plants out of nothing, and all anybody wants are like
Pretty
perfect pastel
flowers.
flowers, which is great, but there's so much more. But for
Mhm.
like this arbitrary idea of perfection, they're both kind of like locked into one position, and they really can't explore possibility.
So you see this tension in a really personal, like an interior way. What is expected of me and what do I want? The kind of tension between the rules that people set out and the desires that I have for myself or for the world around me. And you see, this seems to be a way a lot of this tension gets played out in a lot of contemporary media. I'm thinking of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in general,
A lot
and
of examples.
a lot of examples, but particularly the most recent Spider-Man movie, No Way Home. The whole plot hinges on this character conflict of here's what is supposed to happen. I'm supposed to follow the law. I'm supposed to do what's expected of me, but I really wish I could change the way I'm seen and get what I want. I want to have, be known only by those who already know me, only by the ones that I choose to know me. And the whole plot hinges on this. And the choices he makes, one of the things I love about that movie is they let Peter make bad choices and face the fallout, the consequences of his bad choices. As someone said in the movie, is like, you're the one who risked the entire universe to help your friends get into college. I think it's great to see that's all based on this tension between what's expected of me and what I want. And
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, it shows up differently in other Marvel movies. We
Mm-hmm.
were talking about Captain America the other night, the Boy
Yeah,
Scout,
yeah.
like, do what Steve Rogers would be happy, like make Steve Rogers happy, or kind of like is the thing.
He's such a
like,
good guy.
he's such a good guy, but like in everything, so much of what we see in action movies, this isn't just Marvel, but it's
Mm-hmm.
they let this tension between one's duty and morality really play out, like like, oh, they really struggle, but in the end they end up kind of fridging ethics so that they can have
Yeah,
the hero have a powered up battle scene,
yeah,
like
because
um
you got to have special effects, right?
yeah, you need to, yeah, like the ethical dilemma is there only to get the hero angry enough to justify the special effects budget.
Yeah,
um
yeah. Uh,
and
it's
yeah, they you a lot of the time it ends up resorting to violence to solve the problem of like the bad guys, instead of really
you
resolving the
see
tension.
you see this across all kinds of genres. It's not just superhero movies. It's
Which we love, by the way.
yeah, yeah. But you see it in like police procedurals are a really great example. It's a trope. Megan, you said you noticed it in Elementary, how they would pick a lock and break into, somebody's apartment to gather some evidence without a warrant, without, they're breaking the law, they're breaking and entering, and then they lie about it later to the police in order to justify their actions because they're 99.9% sure the evidence is in there. And this is a trope across all sorts of stories that, breaking the law is bad until I really want to do it, until it gets in the way of my goals.
It's still kind of a might, like the ancient world. It's still a might makes right sort of ends justify the means. Like in the ancient world, it was, well, I'm bigger and stronger and more powerful than you. Like I could literally crush you like a bug because I'm a god, or the son of a god. Think about like Achilles. But like in modern literature or like police procedurals, elementary especially, because I loved that show. It's, well, Sherlock is justified in doing this because he's smarter than everybody else. It's the mental power, like mental might makes right. But it leans towards an ends justify the means mode of action.
There are some exceptions to this, and I wish we had time to go into them, but we are running really short on time. Just want to shout out a couple of sort of exceptions that in a way prove the rule. If you're familiar with the Murderbot Diaries, these are really great stories by Martha Wells, and it's about a cyborg basically killing machine that decides it needs to question when it gets orders to kill and how it goes about doing its job. Really great stuff, must read. And then The Good Place, which is one of our favorite shows, raises, kind of like the Euthyphro, it raises a lot of these questions, even if it doesn't always give satisfying answers to them. But
it doesn't back away and use special effects budget to to resolve the plot, but not the tension or the moral tension. But
all that said, after all these millennia, we are still telling these stories about this tension between what's right and wrong, what's good and evil, and what happens when what's right and what's good come into conflict. We haven't found a solution that everybody likes. And even after 2,000 years of Christianity, we don't seem to have a solution. But we think that there's a way in which Christ and the literature, the stories that Christians tell, have the ability to transcend this tension. And this is because we bring a different worldview that looks at stories and looks at the world through a divine lens rather than a merely human lens, something that lets us work through this tension and rise above it.
The tension still exists, but the perspective is different. The perspective shifts because you're no longer just interacting with a binary set of rules. Mm-hmm. You're interacting with a person who loves you, with God himself, who is not trying to trick you into a moral quandary where you make the right choice or you're doomed, like in The Good Place. You're in a real relationship with the giver of life, the giver of goodness, and the giver of the law, like
the one who is goodness itself.
He's goodness itself.
Sure. I mean, these pre-Christian sort of attempts at wrestling with the tension, they're looking for something like a stable foundation that they can build ethics on, and the duty side of things, like, well, it's the law, we can build it on the law, or we can build it on some ideal of goodness that is somehow beyond. But these are both sort of static principles. In Christ, as Megan said, we have a person who relates to us and that we can relate to. And that relationship is a relationship of faith. And what's interesting, I think, the more I study Christianity and my own faith, it begins not with my faith in God, but with God's faith in us. That God is faithful to his people. God is faithful to his creation. And that is why he asks us to be faithful to him. That this relationship of faithfulness becomes the way that we decide what we should do in a given situation.
Sorry, I'm looking at the time and I'm looking at all of our examples.
Yeah. Yeah. Should we jump into some examples?
Let's jump into some examples. So we do examples? So one of the points, like Christ tells us that law was made for man, was not made for the law, but also Jesus did not come to abolish the law, he came to fulfill it. So yes. Again, this is not necessarily a complete resolution of tension for those of us, here on earth who still see through a mirror darkly, but it's a shift in perspective. Like, this is all coming from the God who loves you. Go ahead, Robert. Sorry. I'm gonna gather my thoughts and try and go quick.
Yeah, that's fine. Let's jump into the Bible for some examples of these stories. Maybe there are so many, but Abraham, I think many of us are familiar with the story of Abraham being visited by 3 angels who tell him that they are going to overthrow the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah because of the evil that is there. And Abraham is haggling with the angel, haggling with God, ultimately, over the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham is saying, well, but if you can only find 100 just people in Sodom and Gomorrah, will you condemn the just with the unjust? That's not right. If you can find 100, will you spare the cities for the sake of the 100? And the angel says, I'll spare the city for the sake of the 100. So, well, what if there's just a few less than that? What if there are 90? What if there are 50? What if there are only 10? And
what if there's just one?
I don't think the Bible actually gets down to
Does
just
it get
one,
to one? No.
I think it stops at 10.
I think it's a 10, but then it's like, then.
But it's a small number, and like in the background of all of this is that Abraham's nephew Lot lives in Sodom. And so Abraham is thinking, my nephew is going to be destroyed along with this city, and he wants to save his nephew, right? And so he's like haggling it down to as small as a number as he dares bring to God. And at the same, he's simultaneously making this really profound moral principle. Will you condemn the just with the unjust? But at the same time, he's like, I want to save my nephew. I want to save his family. And the resolution, of course, is that the angels tell Lot and his family to flee from Sodom and Gomorrah, and the cities are overthrown in fire and brimstone. It's a really interesting way of like looking at that tension and a kind of creative resolution of it. No, God is not going to condemn the just with the unjust, but he's not going to leave the unjust uncondemned either. It's a way of kind of stepping above the dichotomy. One
of the other examples many other examples we talked about, Solomon's judgment between the 2 women and the one living baby. Like you
Mhm.
know, the like, okay, yeah, like let's take the baby, cut him in half, and you each get a half. And
So
the judgment is
the
something.
the context is that two different women are claiming the same baby as their own.
Okay, yeah, sorry. The whole
Sorry.
context, you're right. Yeah. Solomon just like chopping babies in half, you
We're
guys. Did you know?
we're
No, kidding,
Catholics. We
kidding.
can't assume everybody's read all the Bible.
Sorry, sorry. Um, um, but his judgment isn't I want to chop this baby in half. The judgment is his assumption that the mother of the child would rather have him live and thrive even with somebody else rather than die. So like, yeah, the choice he makes is um I think the way you put it, Robert, in our conversation was it's a revelatory judgment.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's like it wasn't so much a trick question, but it was like a step beyond
Yeah,
just a right or wrong or tit for tat sort of thing. It was a
it was a
let's
it was a
step
how
back a
far
moment.
are you willing to go in order to pursue this claim? And and then yeah, the answer is yeah, it does. It revealed who was the true mother and who was not. Yeah. Um ah
Maybe we should get it. Maybe we should get into some of the other the Christian literature examples or literature written by Christians. Just because
yeah,
I have a
I just
feeling
want to
people might have
acknowledge
questions too.
I know the examples we just gave are both from the Old Testament. The New
Oh,
Testament, the Gospels themselves are just packed with this. Any of the parables, you see how Christ kind of he doesn't so much answer questions as he breaks them open and shows how the question itself is problematic. Um, and you can see that deeply Christian writers throughout the ages have also kind of tried to do this in various ways. And we probably only have time for one example, and I don't know which one to choose. Do you have a favorite example,
um,
Megan?
this is hard because guys, we have Shakespeare, Dante, Tolkien, C.S. Lewis. Like we have a lot of really good examples here. Like I said, talk to us later on. You know, we'll be happy to chat some more about this.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, let's go for the classic Tolkien because
Let's go
he
for the
was
classic Tolkien. Go for it.
um when we specifically were talking about I mean, again, tons of examples in Tolkien, but um Gandalf talking to Frodo about Gollum, and you know, Frodo saying, I wish
Mhm.
that he had just died. I wish Frodo had killed him. And Gandalf telling him, there are many who deserve death but live, and many who die who deserve life. Do not be hasty to mete out judgment. Sorry, Robert, can you help?
Yeah, yeah. It's and he talks about how we can't know the results of all of our actions,
Yeah,
and
yeah. We don't really exist in that binary of what the right thing was or what
and this
was
is
right or wrong. Like good can come of situations where we didn't expect good to come.
and Gandalf has this sense that Gollum still has a role to play, and indeed Gollum does have an incredibly important role to play in the story, and yet it's a role that Gollum doesn't entirely choose for himself, and Frodo or Gandalf they don't choose it for Gollum, and he's not controlled like a puppet by any higher power, but you do have a sense that there is some greater intention that is bringing these things together, that this is meant to happen, as Gandalf puts it. And the key is to put your trust in that higher power, which as Christians we would call God, we would call the Trinity, we would call, you know, particularly we relate to God through Christ. And when we put our trust in Christ, we may not know, we may not be able to say with certainty, yes, this is the right thing to do, or this is the best thing to do, but we can say, this is a good thing to do, and I put my actions in God's hands. And in the stories that we tell, we can show this faithfulness of trusting the people that God puts with us, the people that God puts with our characters, and trusting God through those people, sort of taking a step of faith with every action, and just asking that God receive that and bless it and bring it to the conclusion that is truly best, whether or not we or the characters recognize it in the moment. I don't know, I kind of got on my soapbox for a minute.
No, that was good soapbox. Good soapbox. I want to know, do we have time for any questions?
We're already past 9:30. We should probably, and I can see, I'm looking over at the Discord, and there's a lot of conversation going on over there.
Yeah, and we've got a few questions in the question answer box here in Zoom as well. I can copy and paste these, and we can maybe answer them over in our, I think our talk has its own little thing in Discord
channel. Yes.
Yeah, we can copy this over and type out some answers over there. Is that?
I think that's okay? That's what we should do. And yeah.
Sorry, Kevin. Sorry, Father Jacob.
We will talk.
We will answer you.
Yes, you will be answered. In the meantime, thank you so much for
and you get an answer.
What was that? I was just saying thank you so much for joining us, and please enjoy the rest of Doxacon. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
I think we will end this now, because I think the next one should be starting.
I think so.
All right.
Oh, Tanya's here.
Wait. Tanya, did you have last words to say? You are muted, Tanya.
There we go. Sorry. I've been listening from the lobby and like trying to field questions and stuff. So I apologize for not being right here, but I wanted to thank you guys both so much. That was a lively conversation. And super fun, and we were talking about it in the Discord chat. So really, yeah, just there's so much. You'll have to read through the chat and find out. But
oh boy, we will.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us and for such a wonderful presentation. That was really a lot of great energy to start with. So thanks. Yeah.
Woo!
Yay! Early morning adrenaline.
Yeah.
Oh, honey, that's called caffeine. So I just wanted to encourage everybody. Our next panel is the Geek Out panel, and we are going to be all geeking out. So it's set up as a meeting. Everybody can talk and share screens and things like that. So we can talk about what's really, I really wanted to call it squee, because that's how we do when we're excited. It's nerd speak. So anyway, join us there, please. And Robert and Megan, thank you again.
Thank you guys. This was delightful. Thank you for listening to us.
It was great. Thank you. All right. Bye.
Oh.